that, Corey. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Bernadette Smith. I am CEO of Equality Institute. And today I'm hosting a special DEI double feature with my friend and colleague, Ashley Brundage. And we're going to be talking about embedding empowerment into organizations. Ashley, you have a hell of a story. So would you mind just sharing a little bit of your bio? I mean, I could read your bio, but I would rather you just tell the world a little bit about your own background and your own story.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to see our brands partnering together because when we partner together, we move faster together, we thrive together, we drive results, we make impacts. So thank you. Yeah, I overcame harassment, discrimination, and homelessness and decided to live authentically and fight against the grain as an out transgender woman living in Florida with no college education in 2008, and I kind of uncovered, recovered, and covered again, and then came out of the closet finally in 2010, um, and then I tried to find employment. And let me just tell you, the world that we live in today, but definitely in 2010 was not easy. And it's why this work that you do and my organization does to drive empowerment for people is so important, because I got told everything from we would never hire anyone like you to you have the wrong address to please leave. I had the cops called on me from a job interview. I got trespassed. These are real scenarios that people are facing each and every day, even here in 2022. And so I needed to come up with a way to overcome obstacles, and that was empowering my differences, not just my gender, but also my educational status, which was a big thing that I had to overcome. But also the fact that I have a hidden disability. All of those things were built into how I was going to empower differences, and everyone can drive empowerment. And so I found that job. I got hired as a part-time bank teller because that was the only job I could find. And then over the next 4 years, I focused my energy on my 4 empowerment steps, and I grew my career from part-time bank teller to become the National Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at PNC Bank. And thank you. And now, well, I spent over 6 years doing that DEI work and driving empowerment through diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now I get to do it every day for all kinds of organizations and people to help them really understand empowerment as a framework.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, that's what we're really going to talk about today is empowerment as a framework and how actually empowerment can be embedded in organizations. So, I think what one of the things that's been fascinating about our conversation so far to me is that you have kind of a unique perspective on what empowerment actually even is. So, can you define empowerment for all of us here and how you define it specifically?
Yeah, and well, and you bring up an amazing point, which is that every single individual human on this planet will define empowerment differently. So how I define empowerment is 3 key elements. And oftentimes and I may say this is jokingly, but it's an app that you don't even have to download onto your phone, because I know that that's not very far from everyone who's watching today. We all have this because we need this to survive in this world. But it's an app, and I say app because it's authority, power, and people. And those 3 key elements are necessary for empowerment to be present. We can't necessarily say that something is empowering without there actually being a person that's confirming the empowerment existing. And then authority, right, is typically someone in charge. That's how most people see authority. But it's also career development and all the other sort of things that connect to that. And then power will always initially be money, will
Right.
be the first thing that people think about power. And they think, what is that resource? So power is usually the tracked metric that drives change.
So power is the metric. Wow, this is kind of blowing my mind here, right? It's like who first of all, anyone who's watching, feel free to type questions in the chat at any point. We will get to those. We'll take a look at those and add your comments. The power is the resource and power is the metric, right? So can you give me an example of how this actually plays out? Like how does power move? Like in a real world scenario, how does power move through an organization like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, let's start with the money, because
Sure.
the money does not lie. I mean, I worked for 11 years for a financial services organization, and financial services organizations understand power and they understand money and moving money from point A to point B. So that is the most easy tracked item that you can look at is what is the actual financial commitment. Right now there's lots of discussions around my community. The transgender community is under assault in many ways. But when it comes down to it, what are the actual power dynamics? I was talking about Leah Thomas the other day, and
Who is a
well,
trans swimmer?
yes. And her being present at the NCAA championships, just being there, has resulted in more power for the organizers of the event. Because how many more press credentials were issued? How many more attendees were there? So all of that is monetary impacts that is being driven from her being herself and driving empowerment for others. She literally is driving empowerment for the host of the NCAA championships.
So we have a question here from Chris. Do you need to start with the authority person?
No. Well, I mean, every person holds on to authority on this planet in some way, shape, or form. It won't always be the CEO. Now, granted, yes, if you have access, right, because that's going to be one of the biggest actions that I know we're going to talk about. Think about who you have access to and where you start. Yes, you can start with yourself. That's why my 4-step process, step 1 is to know yourself, because you have to know where you stand on this world of navigating empowerment. And if you don't know where you stand on privileges and disprivileges related to all of the 10 most common differences that we hold as humans, that is why this work is so important.
So tell me more about that, about, examining. So we know that a lot of organizations and people have the best of intentions, right? I mean, we have these conversations with clients and prospective clients, and they have good intentions, but they might not have authority, they might not have influence, or they might not have the resources in the form of the power in the form of resources, right? But what's the challenge? Can we talk a little bit more about why they struggle to make real progress because they haven't examined those systems? What is the impact of examining the systems? How does that take us a lot closer, or
Um,
get us more on this journey?
yeah, so I think that foundationally, there's an organization out there today, right, that is, doing great work. But think about, okay, well, how many people are a part of the DEI work that your organization is doing? So the number of how many people, that's a empowerment statistic, right?
Okay.
Because those are all people that are passionate and driving change. So you have to capture those numbers. But bigger than that is each and every individual person in your organization has an opportunity to be looking for this. And are they looking for it every day? Are they thinking about where to find the empowerment? Because it's living in every moment.
Okay.
And if we're educating them and we're creating the ability for those individual people in an organization to be thinking on this level, to
Mm-hmm.
look for the empowerment and to be able to track the empowerment of what they're doing, because people are passionate, but
Sure.
passion in its own right is only just part of the recipe.
Sure.
So I really challenge organizations to start from a holistic standpoint of really educating their employees on what empowerment truly is. And then they can make their own references to how they track it, right? And then
Okay.
that's, of course, where we'll start to drive the embedding and the measuring.
So as they start this process of examining what power truly is, what are some of the, besides looking at the numbers of employees and sort of how they're engaged, what are other ways we can examine these systems and sort of get a foundation, a
Yeah.
foundational place to start?
I mean, I know that a lot of organizations are trying to track recruiting numbers, right? They're also trying to track promotions,
Mm-hmm.
career development. All of those things tie into this mix of empowering people. Um, but it also is about the work that you do outside of the doors, the four walls of your organization. Um, so who are you giving money to?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we're back to this whole money thing, right? Because money is
Sure.
going to be a large driver of where empowerment lives. So who's your financial sponsors? Who's your commitments? Who are you, who are you investing in? Um, all of those things. And are there counter competing priorities? Does your organization have a political action committee, right? What's happening there? Um, External commitment is a big part of this as well. And those are all tracked deliverables.
Okay. I mean, those are, I mean, as you're talking, the thing, what keeps coming to my mind is the recent situation with Disney.
Mm,
Disney certainly, checks all the inclusive boxes, but as some of the viewers may know, as I'm sure you know, Ashley, since you live in that area as well,
boy.
is Disney
Gay.
also Disney gave money to supporters of a bill of the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. So they were a financial backer of the legislators behind that bill. And they have received a lot of backlash from their employees who are basically calling, their employer a hypocrite, essentially.
Mhm.
And, so Disney's power, I mean, they're using their power and influence for both good and evil.
But I will tell you, if you examine every single major corporation's political action committee donations, you're gonna, and we could probably have a whole entire conversation just on the on PAC because I
Sure.
studied PACs a lot. In fact, I did a lot of a lot of work in the financial industry space on that. You have advocacy can start with one person, but it will always need more than one person to drive real change.
So everyone out there watching, it starts with you, but find a co-conspirator, a collaborator, someone else, because you are going to need that groundswell of support to actually start to do these types of things, to really start to embed empowerment. So we have a question, Ashley. Can you please repeat the three parts of empowerment? And let's dig more about how we actually embed empowerment into organizations.
Oh, the app, authority, power, and people.
Can
And
you explain that one more time for folks who might just be joining us?
yeah, so authority is, of course, who's in charge, typically who's the boss, right?
Uh-huh.
Did you ever watch Who's the Boss?
I did, showing my age.
Okay, oh, good, because we're in the same age demo. So authority, who's in charge, but also authority around how people are developed, career development, who's put into those positions, how who's in leadership, how they're represented. All of that kind of falls into that authority bucket. And there's a lot of
Sure.
other things that fall into the authority bucket, but we can talk more on that off cycle. Power, which is the first thing that comes to mind for me, and now it may be different for you, is money.
Funny.
Money, but it's also some sort of tracked metric that drives the power in organizations and moves it. So it's typically a number that will be power. So if we're just one person advocating for changes in a corporate PAC, that's just one. But if today we have however many people watching on the live stream and we all start doing that, now we're 50 or we're 100 or
Mhm.
we're right. And then who does those 100 people tell? So
Sure.
that's power. Okay. And then people, we know what people is, but people is every person, a living, breathing person that is alive and ready to contribute. And that's really important because an organization can't necessarily feel empowerment. And that's the main differentiating factor here.
It's because organizations don't, and you can't empower others. You can only empower yourself. That's right.
You can empower, well, you can empower an individual can potentially provide empowerment opportunities for other people, but it's still up to the individual person to receive it.
Got it. So we have a comment here. I read a study that you need 25% of a population to create organizational change. I haven't seen that study or that number. Do you think it's that high, Ashley, based on your own experience? Maybe neither of us have been in organizations that have truly changed effectively.
Uh, I think it depends on who the 25% is,
Sure.
honestly, because one of my favorite ways to drive impacts in a major organization, like the one I worked for so many years, was to find the right person on a higher level
Sure.
and then make it their idea
Hmm.
and get them to realize that they want to make this change or they want to, change the way the pack decides to make donations or to change the way that they allocate sponsorships in the community. You know, that's where this real stuff becomes real special.
So that actually is a great segue because I would really love to give people some tangible takeaways here. So how can organizations actually build empowerment into their own systems to increase diversity and equity? And if this is the good time to share the empowering actions, I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that knowing so my 4-step process is a good place to start. And so that's know yourself, know others, develop a strategy, and then you take and do empowering action. Um, and so that's my 4-step model. And so ultimately, those actions all drive impacts. And now, of course, you can address each of those actions through a lot of ways. Um, and yeah, you can share the actions with the viewers and, um, but those right now on this, as you'll see them on the slide, they're just words, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It takes a lot of work to be able to build programming surrounding these potential actions.
Sure.
There's a reason I call them empowering actions because through my framework, I'm embedding empowerment into each of them. And so that's my kind of special recipe. But obviously there's a lot of experts in this space that will help you build programming surrounding these types of actions.
So let's talk about let's get specific here. So what are some examples of ways organizations can build empowerment into their systems?
Yeah. So as it relates to specific examples for driving empowerment, so you know, uh, remember, like I said, right? It's authority, power, and people. So all
Hmm.
of those three things have to be intermingled to each exact plan that you're building. So if we're talking about ERGs, because I know that that's a lot of the work that the Equality Institute does, and so if you have ERGs or you're thinking about starting ERGs, right, this is a great opportunity, right, to provide those real tangible opportunities for employees to gain this. And remember, we're back to power. So what is the tracked metric? We're back to authority. So who's being developed? Where's the development plan? How does that mix into this? So I think that we want an organization to really think about what is the avenue, right? So I mean, the avenue is potentially different depending, right, where you are and how big your organization is. Not every organization is going to be in a situation where they can have ERGs.
Sure.
So what do what is what's the everything has to be priority driven. So the way that I built these actions is prioritized based on differences also. So if we're talking about empowering gender, because it is Women's History Month, so empowering gender is going to have a different recipe of empowerment, and it's going to have a different prioritization for these actions. So, specifically in relation to the ones that are on the screen, obviously mentor is an action that can be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is your organization having a conversation around a specific measurable, right,
Mm-hmm.
mentoring program that works for all of your constituents in your organization? That's
So
an example.
I'm going to pause you there for a second because we have some questions here. And Corey,
Oh,
if you could capture the notes in the chat, that would be great. Corey, if you could type up the 4 steps that you mentioned, Ashley. So know yourself, know others,
to develop your strategy, and
develop your
then
strategy.
empowering action.
Okay, great. So Corey, if you could get those in the chat, that would be great. And also the app would be great. So authority, power, and people.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have some other questions here. Are these steps and the empowering actions, are they supposed to be followed in order or simultaneously? I know the answer to this, but I think it's really it's a fantastic question.
um, well, so you should definitely always start with you.
Okay,
Because if you don't start with you, then it will not necessarily work out.
sure.
So I definitely designed it to start in order and go in order, but that doesn't mean that when you're on your journey that you don't go back in time. So your differences change over the course of your life. I researched the 10 most common differences that we hold as humans. And that's the cornerstone of how I built this empowerment program, is based on that research. And I have to tell you, more things about your differences change than stay the same.
Sure.
But perception is that I'm who I am,
Mm,
especially potentially people who might be dismissing a diversity program because they think that that doesn't apply to them, when it actually applies to everybody because everyone has differences.
sure.
So I think that that's really important. So the self-assessment, which you can actually grab the self-assessment from my website, and you can click the self-assessment button and download it for free. I don't charge anything for the assessment because I want to be able to give step 1 in someone's empowerment journey for themselves to drive that change. Uh, so
So we're gonna follow the steps in order, ideally.
but you
Okay.
will have to go back at times.
Sure.
Is ultimately my point that I'm making here, is that
Okay.
because things will change about your differences. You may acquire more privilege, or you may end up acquiring more disprivilege as you move
Sure.
throughout the world, right? As we get older, we move into a different age demographic. Eventually, we might be moving into an age disprivilege in
Sure.
society. So age is a perfect one that changes every
Mhm.
single minute we're on this planet. Maybe not everyone is going to change their gender, but gender is changeable, so there is
Mhm.
that. Um,
Sure. And ability.
yeah, ability changes,
Mhm.
and so language changes. You can learn a new language.
Mhm.
Education changes. You can go to school. You can gain a certification, right? We start to think about, wait a minute, oh, so yeah, wow, sexuality can change,
Sure.
our religion can change. So many things about what makes us who we are is, on a foundational basis, adjustable.
Sure. So we should be going through those 4 steps, repeating them often, honestly, because it's sort of a constant process of
Yeah.
reflection and reassessment, and looking for opportunities to apply these different actions that we're talking about.
Yes.
So let's dig into these empowering actions and get specific here.
You got it.
So,
So
these 10 actions, there's 5 of them up here now. They don't have to be done in any order, right? and they can
They
be applied in lots of different ways. So can you give me a few examples?
Yeah. So, well, and they don't have to be done in any specific order, but depending upon which difference you're thinking about empowering, there is an order that can be beneficial. And that's from the research. So when someone actually reads my book, they'll be able to figure out which difference and how does that actually apply by which action I should focus on. Um, like for example, differing abilities, access would be priority number one.
Sure.
So each potential difference has a prioritization list found in my research.
Great.
But back to your question, because I've been pivoting away from your question. um, so empower as an action. I think number one, your specific thing is to target the actual measurable thing that you can do to drive the app of empowerment. So if you don't know what the number is, that empower as an action is all about that, but it's also about reframing your mind, because sometimes we tend to look at our differences as obstacles.
Mm,
As humans, we say,
sure.
oh, well, I don't want anyone to know this about me.
Hmm.
And when in actuality, your difference is potentially your biggest strategic advantage over someone else.
Absolutely. It took me a long time to figure that out. And I think it takes a lot of other people too, because we, as human beings, we have this like natural urge to both want to fit in and also stand out, right? And I think that oftentimes the urge to fit in trumps, at least in the beginning. That's the one that we tend to lean into. So I can certainly relate to that for sure. Can you give
Yeah.
other examples here?
Yeah. So as it relates to educate, I think that that's the easiest one to give examples,
Mhm.
right? And I have given some examples in relation to that, right? So it's certifications, it's learned behaviors, it's taking a course, it's enrolling in school. Those are all great opportunities. Motivation as an action is really stemmed around the things that drive you to fight for a stronger future. So my actions around motivation really tend to stem in the space around self-healing and help and clarity. So like yoga and other mindful activities are really great in this space. For me, for motivation, it's all about these two guys right here. So they're
Mhm.
a part of everything that I do. They're always in my mind and my heart because they're the reason that I'm still living in this world. Um, Mentor, I think I gave a few examples on that, especially around creating specific programming. And then access, it's all about creating opportunity for change. Tracked metrics surrounding the ability for people to be present is really important. So make sure that you're embedding that into your organization. Those are some of my favorite actions. And then, of course, you've flipped the screen. Inspire as an empowering action is all about communication. So it's literally a communications module. So in each of these actions, when you engage on my platform, there's 5 hours of video content where I'll guide you through each action as you're enrolling in my empowering online curriculum course. Um, so Inspire is all communication based and how we build and develop stories, but then how we tell them, and then how we work to then connect with the other empowering actions to amplify them. Um, Inclusion as an empowering action, right? Obviously, as you know, this is your bread and butter. Is all about culture, belonging, acceptance, building that connectivity. So that's tracked programs like employee resource groups, right, are really great ways to drive them and track the metric in this space. I saw you were thinking about something on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is super helpful. I was thinking about how I want to tell the world about your course and your programs and all that. But continue these, and then we'll give you a chance to.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk more
Um,
about that.
So invest as an empowering action is really, really obviously it's back to power, and it yes definitely has to do with money, but it also could be your time, right? It could also be a talent that you hold on to. It could be any one of those types of things to invest in. And obviously we want to connect it to people. Yes, you can make a financial investment for yourself, but at the end of the day, make sure that your investments also connect back to other humans on this planet through each difference, because each of those 10 most common differences has opportunities for investments. So if you see a community that needs amplification, you know, i.e., if you're thinking that you see the trans community being attacked every which way, well, start thinking about how you can make an investment for the community who really needs it. Um, and so that might be Trans Tech Social, it might be Trans Can Work, it might be the Trans Latina Coalition, it might be the National Center for Transgender Equality. Maybe you make a donation, maybe you volunteer, right? So those are great ways to drive investments as empowering actions, because it has to connect to other people and drive authority and power. Influence is that megaphone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that really, really way of amplifying. That's the true amplification of what people are doing. So, of course, you can track that through followers, through retweets, through sharing on social media, right? Those are easy, quick hit items that you can do to drive empowerment through the action of influence. And then enlighten is, of course, not the last empowering action because we didn't like it or anything. It's because I think it's one of those last dominoes that has to fall for real empowerment to flow, because enlightenment sometimes gets misconfused or confused around what it actually means or what it does and how it differs from education. So remember that education is the knowledge opportunity, and
Mm-hmm.
enlightenment is knowledge, but also validated knowledge. It's not just knowledge, but it's understanding. So it's literally the proof that someone understands the work that you're doing and that it's connected both to the mind and the heart. So if it doesn't have all of the work that you're doing and all the actions involved in it, then you might not necessarily be driving real enlightenment for people.
So, all of these 10 actions are actions that everyone watching can take, actions that I can take, actions that everyone probably has a responsibility to take given our own levels of privilege,
Yes.
in order to what? Like, what is the outcome here? What is your sort of holy grail, your vision here?
Um, yeah. So for me, it's self actualization. That's the ultimate guided last item that drops from all of this work. You've gone through the 4 steps, you're taking action, you're impacting others, you're using your app with all of these actions. And then what you get is that self actualization. And that's when you've realized where empowerment lives for you and how you track it and how you measure it. And you can actually feel it and you recognize the difference. So what I do in my curriculum is you've taken the assessment at the beginning to identify where empowerment lives. And then when you've reached an empowerment milestone at the end of the day, or the end of the month, or the end of the week, or the end of the year, or whenever, you then retake the assessment again. But this time, you may answer it differently. And seeing in your own handwriting or your own typing what you've written from then to now is when you've acquired the self actualization, because now you'll see, oh, that's what I thought about empowerment, but this is what I think about it now.
And the benefit for organizations is what? Empowered employees are blank.
Yes, they're 78% more impactful in regards to generating results, because they're going to know what the authority and the power that's being driven from all the work that they're going to do.
So, one of the ways to embed empowerment into organizations is to educate employees on how to leverage their own, or how to self empower themselves.
Yeah.
How to, is it self empower? Is that the,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
or
think
how to
it's just
empower themselves?
empowerment or self empowerment, but the self actualization is the big driver here,
Sure.
because the individual really has to realize where this all lives. because they're hearing it from 80 million directions, right? Especially if they're involved in the D&I program.
Sure. And can you share that statistic again so Corey can share it in the chat?
Yeah, yeah, and
78%.
on the follow up, I'll share the report that I pulled that from. But 78% is employees are 78% more impactful with the knowledge level and understanding surrounding what empowerment truly is.
Awesome. And so the end result for organizations is obviously more self-actualized employees, but also increased diversity and more equitable places to work because these employees are living outside themselves and doing more for others by using their influence, by investing in others, by mentoring,
Yeah.
etc.
Well, and the retention, right, is going to
Sure.
be, improved, and career development is going to be more centered because people are going to be really actionable in this space. So that's why the empowering actions are so important.
So, one of the things that I think is very cool about your business model is that you have this amazing leadership development program. You have your online course, you do your keynotes, workshops, all of that stuff, and you talk to everyone. You know, your audience is not just the LGBTQ employee resource group, but your audience is everyone. And through your own work and your own curriculum and by living your authentic self, you are, sort of giving a stealth trans inclusion session as well, which I think
Oh,
is absolutely fantastic.
oh my God. You're like prompting me to tell that story.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started as a trans educator 7, 8 years ago. And I would do the trans 101. I would do the what to do. Oh, you have someone transitioning, you call me, and I would come in and I would do a whole session. And but who shows up to those? Who shows up to those? Right?
HR,
Right. HR, right? You may get the D&I people, you get the ERG leaders, you get the Pride ERG.
the obvious
Um,
people.
Yeah, and it's the allies. It's the people
Sure,
who somewhat know this, or want to know it. How do we
sure.
reach all the other people? And that's when I had an epiphany,
I love epiphanies.
which was, what would happen if I came to just do a leadership conversation or leadership series for a whole global organization,
Mhm.
not through the DNI.
And it's working. It's
and
amazing.
And I did that. Oh my goodness. I've done that a bunch of times now for organizations. And I come and I share my leadership development model of empowerment, because leadership and empowerment drives real people to understand any difference. And it's a business results model that drives change. How do you think I was able to go from part-time teller to be the VP of DEI in 4 years with no college education? It was because I was business oriented. I was generating $2.5 million in revenue every single year while not getting paid anywhere close to that for the organization. Okay. I was tracking every single metric driven deliverable while I was doing my job as a banker working in a branch. Okay.
Nice.
And every single thing was tracked regarding what I was doing, where I was, who I was in meeting, and what the impact was. So if you're not tracking the impact and that's not part of this whole journey, then you're missing something. We're missing the empowerment, because that's the empowerment, is the impacts.
So,
And
yep, yes, please.
yeah, so ultimately, being the leadership speaker at an event or a corporation is literally mind blown to people, right? Because then I'm not the typical person that they see in that venue. And I do
Absolutely.
more transgender inclusion while not talking about transgender inclusion by showing up and eliminating an unconscious bias upon what people think the trans community should be doing and what they're doing and who they know and what they do.
I think it's fantastic. I love it. It's like a covert operation. I think, and I think that, for those of you watching, I really think that Ashley's story is inspiring because yeah, yes, you had a lot of disprivilege, as you say, a lot of, multiple marginalized identities that you leveraged in one way or another to, empower yourself. But so there's clearly inspiration there, But the tangible takeaways for those watching: tracking every meeting, paying attention to the value of opportunities. No matter what level you are in an organization, Ashley did this from a part-time teller position at a local branch is where she started. So all of us have the ability to start paying attention to these metrics. And Corey, if you can capture some of these in the chat as well. So can you bring us back to some of those other metrics that you were saying that you specifically tracked to
Yeah,
help
I tracked
get
the
that leverage?
the relationships that I was cultivating, how many business contacts. I was tracking all of this through the DEI work that I was doing as well, because I was part of an employee resource group. I was building a D&I council. Okay, and this was how we tracked those results. It was all metric driven around relationship building, around business cultivated, business wins. It got to the point where I had to involve other people in the branch and other branches, and I was referring business in other cities, and then and also opening up the eyes to new clientele too. So if you don't know, right, the economic buying, here we go, the NGLCC economic study, right? I know this is like one of our most favorite things to talk about, right? And it's buying power. If you don't know the buying power for your difference, that's another point that you need to talk about that, because if
Mm-hmm.
you talk about it and you tell people, you're going to change their perspective on what the empowerment that truly is. So you have to come with this information. If you don't have the information, then you're only playing at the heartstrings, and that's not good enough.
It's not good enough because there's no leverage there.
Right.
Empathy can only go so far. We have to have lots of data to back it up. So we have a bunch of questions here specifically. Can you get a little bit more granular in the last few minutes about how you were tracking impacts, calculating? Did you use an Excel sheet? Like,
Yes.
tell us a little bit more.
Yes.
We need the details here.
Yes. Excel was my friend. Yes, I totally tracked on Excel. I totally, so I've had an event tracking sheet that I used. And so it was, right, who was there, right, who attended, and then what happened from that. And then I was tracking follow-ups too, which is another metric. Um, and then in the financial services industry, right, we have a number attached to every product or service, right? So there's a actual number of what that value is for that relationship. So I use that spreadsheet, right? That would say, okay, an account is worth this, a loan is worth this, a credit card is worth this. So I worked off of that. That's how I came to that $2.5 million, right, in revenue. Corporate banking relationship obviously is worth a whole lot more than a one individual checking account, but they each one have a value. Every single thing has a value that the organization produces. So that was kind of how I did that. And then I also tracked the relationships too, because every touch, every phone call, those are all metrics. So don't ever let rest on that, right? And then it's introduction based. It's track your social media numbers. Literally write down today how many followers you have on every single platform, and then know what they are in this point in time next month or next year, right? And you'll be able to say, hey, we increased from this point to this point.
So everyone watching has more power than you think.
Exactly.
And when you start tracking it, your mind might be a little bit blown, like my mind is a little bit blown right now. I mean, I don't track any of that stuff.
Come on, we got
I
this.
mean, I have a CRM. I'm very organized, but I don't like get into the nitty gritty like what you're talking about. But I think that it's really significant. We have a question here. I don't know if you can answer this one. What was being a speaker at an event worth?
Ooh. um, in I'm trying to understand what do you think in which capacity? Like,
Like maybe an NGLCC event or
oh, like
local
if
chamber events, maybe something
somebody's
like that.
if somebody's thinking about like speaking at an event like in kind or something, and then what is?
I think it's more about tracking. If you speak at an event, if
Oh,
you were
okay, yeah.
a
So how
teller and
many?
you spoke at an
Right.
event, right?
How many attendees? How much sponsorship was curated from the event? How many organizations sponsored it? What was the dollar impact? how many people volunteered at that event, so how many volunteer hours was tracked. All of those are potential empowerment nuggets that could come from that. But what was the impressions on the website for the event? How much tracked? How many visits? Right, you can track visitors for that page. So that would be kind of some of those things that you might pull from an event. If it's an online event, those are a lot easier to track metrics, right? Because you know exactly how many people clicked in, you know how long they were there, you know if they were engaged or not. It's one of the reasons I love some of the online tracking tools
Sure.
that can really get at that.
Well, I think you're like really getting people excited because someone here said would be awesome to have a sample spreadsheet.
Oh boy. God, I don't know if I have that or not, but I can create one definitely. If you contact me.
I think this is all like really exciting stuff. Well, you have a book that's called Empowering Differences. You get into a lot more detail about all of this stuff. I know you have an online course, and folks can hire you for workshops and keynotes and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Any final thoughts? Any final questions from the audience? Any final comments from you, Ashley?
Yeah, well, I mean, I also have a really exciting conference coming up that I
Oh
hope to
yeah.
see you all at. I'm hosting the first ever Voyage of Empowerment, which is a 5-night leadership development conference, all inclusive, where you'll have your internet, you can have your beverages of choice. It's all included. I'm also working on an amazing empowerment excursion where we're going to volunteer and give back to the community in Cozumel, Mexico, where we'll be on this voyage of empowerment. So definitely, I would love to see you all there. And if you don't have the empowerment to attend, and by empowerment, I'm talking about the money, I do have a scholarship portal open. I also have a speaker portal that's still open just for just a few more days. And you can actually contact me and I'll give you the attendee flyer, which lists all the benefits and the price, and you can submit that to the organization that you work for and get them to pay for it. Let's empower them to move you forward in your career. So yeah, that's my really exciting thing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And the budget for this should come from learning and development.
Yes,
It's not a diversity thing. This is not what this is about. I mean, that's the side effect, right? That's the benefit,
exactly.
but it's not what you're leading with.
Yeah, well, we have to lead with empowerment.
We're leading with empowerment in this context. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. Thank you all for joining this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I love chatting with you. I love your energy. I love your perspective. I think you're a total badass. I don't know if you can say that on LinkedIn, but I think you are. And this has been a great conversation. So thank you so much for joining, Ashley. Thank you all for being here today. Make sure you visit empoweringdifferences.com. And our next DEI double feature is coming up in about a month, and we're going to be talking about Pride programming for 2022. So stay tuned for more information on that with my special guest, Derek Johnson. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.